So even technology has realized the power of conversation and collaboration, and it is changing the pace of our communication. Since we can exchange information real time with overwhelming amounts of data, transformation into knowledge will give it new value. Therefore, it is imperative that organizations deploy technology to power communication within their ecosystem. I now invite Jaideep Kebalramani, CEO, Legacy Services, and our panel chair for the next session on New Age technology powering the communication ecosystem. Jaideep has over 2 decades of global experience in technology, digital, and outsourcing industry. He also holds a patent in artificial intelligence. Joining him on this panel are Sanjay Padar, MD, Accenture Labs, Asia Pacific, Dipali Nair, Director Marketing, IBM India and South Asia, and Unmesh Pawar, Partner and Head, People, Performance and Culture, KPMG India. I request you to come on stage.
All right, very good afternoon. All 4 of us do realize that we are the folks who are standing between...
I guess.
This works? Yep. So I was saying all 4 of us do realize that we are the ones who are standing between great lunch and you. So we'll be mindful of time and the fact that there is someone who's passing around evil eyes over here, so we'll be careful. A very good afternoon to all of you. And dear panelists, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Not working? Is this better? As a panel, we'll focus on 2 key takeaways. One is how digital is actually permeated through the organizations and how it is actually helping break barriers rather than raise interpersonal barriers. One would think that digital actually causes a lack of interpersonal communication. So we're going to focus on that. And AI is a hot topic. A lot of people are grappling with it. So we'll focus a little bit on artificial intelligence and how it is transforming communication at the workplace. With this, I'll request my panelists to give opening comments, and then I have a few questions for each one of you as well. Let's start with the lady.
Great, thank you. So I work for IBM, and the moment you use the word artificial intelligence, my first reaction was, it's augmented intelligence. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind. I think the world around us is changing. We all know that. But the speed at which it's changing is mind-boggling. If you're working in the technology space, I think we learn new things pretty much every year. The new technologies that are coming are very, very different. So I know while you started out with AI, there are 2 things that I want to talk about. One is, of course, the impact that artificial intelligence is happening in our lives, not just as clients and customers, and I know the previous panels have spoken about how customers get impacted, but even when you're working in organizations, the way you're working will change and is changing in the last few years. We all have to learn new software and how to communicate. But I think the point also is about the fact that when an organization is deploying technology, it's not just the technology deployment and processes that need to change. So I've been a marketer for, over 2 decades. So it's not just, for example, how my marketing organization deploys technology, but also the kind of people I'm choosing, how they interact with each other, the skill sets that are required to run marketing today. The ROI expectation, for example, today from marketing has happened on account of the fact that we deploy technology. So gone are the days when, one would say that 50% of my marketing money is wasted and I don't know which 50% it is. Today, it's possible and I'm responsible for, deploying all the marketing dollars and proving ROI. So that's one aspect that I want to talk about. I think the second thing, in the societal context, our parameters and barometers are changing. So for example, the work that's happening inside IBM on the blockchain space, and especially the work that's happening in food safety, the work that's happening against human trafficking, some of that is AI plus blockchain, the work that's happening in the area of mining and, the good tech, that work and that consciousness, I think today is, a conversation that I'm hoping that, you guys all take back from today's conversation.
Thanks, Jaideep. I lead the lab, so maybe I will be talking about things that is few years ahead. So pardon me for that. I've been during the course of this conversation. But what I would really like to share with all of you is how all these exponential technologies, as we call it, whether it's artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, augmented reality, the development in genomics and things like that, how are these going to redefine the way we work? Because we are talking about workspace. Obviously, it will redefine the way we live as well. And probably in the course of our conversation today, I'll get an opportunity to share some of this very interesting research that we do in the lab, which will help us reimagine communication like we can't think of it today. You know, because one thing I want to share is today when we talk about communication, we largely imagine human beings communicating. That would fundamentally change, right? So there will be a lot of shifts happening in the communication space. A topic like this, a whole day can be dedicated because there's so much things happening there. But hopefully we'll talk about many of those aspects.
I just want to add, and I wanted to check in the room over here. How many of you use WebEx at office very frequently for communication? Yeah, most of you, look younger, especially at the back. I got used to using WebEx about 8 months ago when I shifted to IBM. And believe me, I think I'm ready to write, 10 tips on how to, appear my normal self on WebEx. It needs to be managed, Yeah. Yeah.
Great. I think great points. I think a few that I want to make. And before I think I want to connect the earlier session to this session. We talked about purpose and the value of communication, and then bringing it into our conversation of how it's helping break silos. I think it's an interesting time in history for everybody. We've never been as connected as we have been, isn't it? All of us at least have 1 or 2 social media kind of apps that connect each other. So it's a great time in history that we're all supremely connected. But it's also a phenomenal time in history where there is an absence of connection between individuals. And connected with that, of course, is the point around what we see around us, the stress in the workplace, mental health and where it is today at an all-time high. It's bringing a very interesting perspective to say, where are we really going with all of this, right? So that's the overarching premise that I want. And I think therefore for organizations, and I'm going to bring in the people side and the HR side of this narrative in here, it's becoming equally more complex that more and more technologies that we have at our disposal to be able to really build the connection to our employees, build the connection to the organizational purpose. At the core, are we really taking care of our people? And do we really know our people as much, right? So I think that's a premise that I want to lay out here. Now, if you look at any corporate, any decent corporate today has multiple channels of communication with its employees. And the whole focus is, can we really synergize the organization? Can we get everybody to sing from the same choir sheet and therefore break the silos within the firm? And therefore, of course, you have platforms and the likes of Yammer, Slack, or Facebook Workplace, or whatever, right? It helps you to be able to all be aware of what's happening at the same time within the organization. Then, of course, you have collaboration tools, and collaboration tools with an intent to access knowledge, to be able to access experts within the organization, and different organizations have different approaches around knowledge exchange. Ideation tools, and I think I have, and especially so coming out of the professional services business, where Sanjay can talk about, as well as the IBM environment, where we rely on people and our knowledge and the ability to harness knowledge for future engagements. And that's where technology plays a big role. And finally, the ability to ideate, right? We are in the professional services business. We have to at least be 2 steps ahead of our clients. And the power of our people and the power of the young generation and the power of ideation, getting people into rooms is an archaic way of ideating today, right? And therefore, when organizations today, using the 200,000, 300,000 people, can jump onto a jam and really ideate over a 48-hour period and define a global strategy. Those are things that were not necessarily possible before. And I think I'd like to believe some of these technologies today are helping build synergy in the organization, and being able to break some of these silos.
Thanks, Unmesh, and that kind of gives a segue into the next question I had for all of y'all. If all of you watch your smartphone usage, you'll realize that on an average, 60% of your time goes into communication apps like WhatsApp. And that's only going to increase. Organizations are fast replacing emails with tools like Yammer and WhatsApp and all of that. Like instant communication has become the norm. And there used to be a statistic that used to float around when most of us were younger that you get interrupted at your workplace like 14 times an hour. Now I think it's 14 times a minute, and the velocity is only increasing. With that in the context, and the point that you made, Unmesh, we have to break down interpersonal barriers rather than create. So how are organizations embracing digital technology to actually break that? And maybe I'll request you to start with that, Sanjay.
Well, the last century was all about industrialization. So the way organizations were designed, they were siloed by design, because a group would be doing almost the same kind of work and they would specialize in that, and they would lose sight of the overall bigger purpose, right? So, and that helped to scale. So organizations of the past were designed to be to serve the purpose of industrialization. But the organizations of today, they have to be different because they are driven more by innovation. Their survival depends on innovation. Their survival doesn't depend on industrialization. Their survival depends on creating unique experiences for their customers, and that is only possible when you organize yourself differently, in some sense create a hybrid organization, team of teams. In some sense, you are breaking the silos. And that can possibly explain your observation, why are communications becoming more WhatsApp-like, and even if you look at one of the, say Microsoft, they have come up with Teams, which is probably going to replace Skype, and all this allows you to create those kind of hybrid teams of diverse people who come together to solve a purpose, right, and to innovate. So that's one area where the digital technologies are helping organizations evolve. Some more futuristic ideas that I have in mind is we don't realize how much machines have penetrated our work life. We don't realize how many of the decisions that are being taken by algorithms today, right? I have been doing AI, and I have over 20 patents in AI. So I've been doing AI for the past 6 years at least, and the fact remains that the workplace of the future is not going to be about humans alone. It's going to be a complex setup of humans and machines. And when I say machines, I don't really mean a physical robots. It can be a software robot. Many of you who are working in back offices may know concepts like robotic process automation, for example. Now, the challenge is there is an element of communication there as well, because I won't name the companies, but one of the very well-known organizations created a chatbot, and the chatbot went rogue within 24 hours, right? When it was not...
Must not have been on Watson.
It was not on Watson, but I will not reveal whose chatbot it was, but the chatbot went rogue, and it was obviously, it became racial, and it was obviously communicating and not reflecting the culture of the organization it represents. So the point here is these bots or these machines have to be trained by we humans. We have to train them. We have to sustain them, because they have to be. So if you are running the training organization of your firm, you have to also think now about how do I train the machines, not just the humans alone. And you have to, unfortunately, as humans, we have to explain their actions. When things don't work the right way, people will still come to us and say, can you explain? So your workplace of the future will have lot of interesting dimensions. On the flip side, these machines will amplify us, and so I think that is the other aspects. And in the research lab, we are doing a lot of research on this human-machine interactions and communications in the workplace, right? That's very important. I think in a prior panel, somebody also spoke about the whole fact about collective intelligence. Because it's not about me and my bot. It's going to be a very complex architecture of multiple teams, multiple people, multiple bots, and collective intelligence to do a certain task, right? So that's another very interesting way of looking at how the future workplace will be looking like. And in the labs, we are already researching on those aspects as well. The third aspect I wanted to call out was, with the digital question that you asked is, if a few of you have read the book Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, I think it's we are entering a brave world where, for the first time, our secrets are not our secrets. Today we have the freedom to only communicate what we would like to communicate, and the rest can be inside our mind. But we did some extensive research in the area of what is called affective computing or emotion analytics. Actually deployed it in India, in abroad as well, in London and a few other places, where so much is revealed from the tonal quality of our voice. Today you have technology. You can right now analyze me and tell, am I talking something I believe in, or I'm just communicating for the sake of it. You can then correlate that with my facial expression. I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling happy, So we have been experimenting with all this, and what is the value of all this? Because in future, the communications will also be able to understand what is really happening in your mind. I may say something, but I may be thinking something else. That also you will be able to figure out, right? And then even the machines are going to fine-tune their response to you based on your emotional state. So you call up a bot and you say, a travel bot, and you're very, very disgusted with something. Its response to you will be very different so that it can calm you down compared to in some other emotional state. So there are several things happening, and finally, I think, at a more fundamental level, we talk about inclusive workplace, right? And we have done very little to really enable an inclusive workplace, and I think with the new digital technologies and especially technologies like AI and others, now it's so simple to make a workplace inclusive. In fact, I did share with you, Jaideep, some very interesting work we did based on a specific ask from one of our employees in Manila. She is deaf and she is mute. And in my firm, in Accenture, we all use Sky for Business. And we have thousands of people, because we are a 500,000 strong organization. We have thousands of people who have some who are specially abled. And then this person reached out and said, every time I enter into a Sky for Business call, I need a human being to assist me. How do you expect me to be? And we said, oh, that's strange. Why do we have to do that way? And then we worked on a very simple solution, and today she can independently, she's joining calls like all of us. And so I feel the technologies are there. We just have to reimagine the solutions, and we can really change the workplace. So a lot of stuff there.
Unmesh, you bring a great HR perspective to the table. I want you to take a cue from what Sanjay shared. If AI is now able to, or in the near future, able to sense what the tonal quality of my voice is, what is my expression, and so on, will appraisals be passé?
Job interviews, maybe.
So I think it's, as I said, interesting times. And tech is really enabling human resources to do a lot of exciting and interesting things, and ethics being a conversation that we need to keep in mind. But I think here's what's happening in corporate India today, and most organizations are trying to experiment with some of this. We all know that the 2014 and 2019 elections was a class example of how social media, digital, and analytics powered both sides to an extent. One side did a better job, I guess. Now, and using some of that, I think organizations have been working on emotional listening. Now, whether it is Yammer, Chatter, or other forms of collaboration tools that you have within the firm, there are tools that allow you to sense the emotional tonality and the quality of what is happening in the organization. And you may not need to then do your Global People Survey and all of those things, because you real time have then the ability to understand and sense what's happening in the organization. The other one is, so we talked in the opening where I talked about saying whilst we are connected, we may not be, the connection may be missing. And therefore, when the organization glue is so loose, people would walk away, and attrition levels are at a relative high in most organizations today with the generations that we are seeing in. And I think, therefore, the need to understand and appreciate individuals better through analytics and AI, I think that and organizations are now able to predict potential attrition cases and proactively engage with some of these people and be able to respond from a career deal elements perspective in a much more smarter way, which was something that we struggled with. And that was happen only if a supervisor is very well connected with his or her team members. I think the interesting time is also with augmented reality and virtual reality today enabling acceleration of learning. You don't have to send people to a factory floor or on a surgery table to learn stuff that they need to. VR and augmented reality is enabling you to be able to train people in a seamless manner, as also use it as a method to truly create an assessment center-like frameworks and see how people will respond to those in situations like these. So I think if you look at this, and Sanjay, you talked about with facial tracking and other devices that are coming in, most of our floors today have closed-circuit cameras, right? And how nice would it be if you can start facial tracking using those cameras to really gauge the emotion in the organization? You may not need as many HR people to tell you what the inside on the floor is, because you will genuinely know whether people are smiling or not smiling, right? And cameras should be good enough to be able to help some of that. And I think the big benefit I think tech is enabling today is hopefully reducing the amount of carbon emission and footprint we are doing because of travel, because technology is enabling us to be able to connect with each other virtually in a much more seamless manner. So I think those are some offerings that I had with respect to how tech, digital, and AI is really powering life in the workplace.
Thanks, Unmesh. Great points. And you just struck at the heart of your own profession. I think cameras could replace HR professionals. But before we move on...
We may not need as many HR people to walk the floor.
Deepali, could you spend a minute on your experience of having worked with large organizations and small organizations and bring in the flavor of how Watson can help both large and small companies in powering communications within the organization?
Sure. So I'm not going to just talk about only Watson, but I think it's about technology and AI that one needs to look at. And I think it's not just communications. I think, so some of the work that we do at IBM is telling us that 60% of the large enterprise CEOs are concerned about the fact that the business model needs to change. So it's not just about communication of employees and what you're offering in terms of customer experience, but they're getting disrupted by the so-called small organizations, which at one point of time are startups, but are becoming bigger. 60% of the CMOs, therefore, are also concerned about the fact that they need to then participate in ensuring how does their organization, move on to these newer business models. And these newer business models will redefine the HR processes, will redefine the communication processes, will redefine sometimes even the product that they have. And for a moment, please indulge me. Just imagine, you're buying health insurance today. The pricing of the health insurance happens because the health insurance companies have a statistical data on a sample, which is the India sample, right? Imagine the world of tomorrow where data is freely available because of the smart devices that you wear and use, and because of the lack of the privacy, information that we're really talking about in terms of responsible usage of data. Health insurance companies will be able to price your health insurance policy for yourself. And if you become healthier, the next year, it'll be cheaper. And if you become healthier, the year later, it'll be cheaper. So this kind of pricing and this kind of, good tech usage of ensuring that, we all get healthier and it'll be cheaper for us imagine the kind of communication and the kind of skills and the kind of organization that it requires at the back end. It'll be a very, very different, insurance organization. It may not even have the functions in the departments that it has today. And that's really, the world of the future that we're talking about. If we look at just sheer communication, I think because the ecosystem is changing around us as consumers, we are no longer comparing, one insurance company to a bank and saying that, banks have these working times and insurance companies have a different work time. We're all comparing ourselves to the best customer service levels that we get. And, to my mind, Amazon does set, standards over there in terms of the, 24/7, speed, no waiting time, empowerment of the people who are actually offering the customer service. Now, as consumers, when we are getting there, we're also expecting this from our banks, from insurance companies, from Indian companies, from smaller companies, and from big companies. So there is no difference from a small company to a big company. Each one of them therefore need to deploy technology, small or big, to do that. But what I find in my experience of working for, the startup organizations as well as for very large multinational corporations, the smaller organizations today are nimbler, faster, and if I look at the Indian entrepreneur, much more faster in terms of deploying technology and calculating the ROI of that technology. They're very clear to say that this is what I'm going to invest and this is what I'm going to get as a result, even when it comes to the context of customer experience, right? Which large organizations are not today able to put a rupee value or a dollar value to it, right? But the smaller startup and the Indian entrepreneur is very quick at calculating that and therefore investing, in technology. So that's a difference that's coming. And to go back as an employee, I think the things that are changing, one of the examples that I want to pick up when you spoke about the chatbots, for example, right? I think what is also happening is that there are newer jobs emerging in the ecosystem. Right? Nandini earlier, when they were on stage, they were talking about, different kind of service providers to the marketing organization itself. So today there is an agency whom I know who only specializes in providing content for the chatbots. Right? So they are a content agency only specializing in that. And these are the new skills that the ecosystem will also have to provide. And I think one of the biggest things, or one of the most important things that's happened to us is, all of us, the data high speed and the cheapness with which the data is available to us in terms of pricing has actually changed the lives around us. And if that were not to have happened, I don't think we would have been sitting here and having this discussion on impact of technology on communication. Yeah.
Thank you. Now that we've got the audience kind of juiced up on AI, I'm going to open up a subject which borders on the realms of ethics and how we should deal with that. We spoke about human-machine interaction. We spoke about automated chatbots, automated Twitter handles, and all of that. The question, and Unmesh, I'd like you to respond first from a HR human perspective. If artificial intelligence, and the reason why we call it intelligence is because it's intelligent, if it falters, should a human be held responsible? You can choose to offer your personal view. I'm not looking for your company's point of view on this one. Unmesh, over to you.
So I think again, do want to qualify this as my personal view, right? I think whilst we chase the amazement that technology offers us, I think it's imperative also as we are developing technology to really have stewardship of what we're really building. And I think the big dilemma today is all these fancy apps and tools and things that you have today, the algorithms today are in a black box, right? So we get pretty excited and enamored with what they can do for you, but what we don't necessarily understand is what goes behind it and why it is able to do what you do. And I'm going to give you an example of this. I remember I was in New York 2014, 2017, and when I ran recruiting for an erstwhile organization, and I was looking at various ecosystem players that we could partner with to truly create a personalized recruiting experience, and I got hold of one of the startups that I was working with, and I got somebody to plant a resume into that, and then I said, let me see what happens over a 6-week period. And this friend of mine in the US who got a few offerings of jobs online, and suddenly it went cold on her, right? So I said, So next time I went back into the US, I called her. She said, this is what happened. I called the founder. He came in with the CTO, etc., etc. And then the CTO opens his laptop, and he actually shows me where all this friend of mine has been every time this job hit her phone and every time she opened the particular job. And it was scary because he said, oh, but she was in New Jersey just about a week ago. I said, New Jersey? And he just thought, oh, it's not something I should have disclosed to you. But it's scary the amount of data that small fringe players may actually be having on our people. And therefore, I think it's imperative before especially in human resources, and whoever is going to buy new tech, needs to get behind and understand what and how the tech is playing. And therefore, when I work with ecosystem players, I have this innate need to understand how that algorithm works. And a very few really are willing to unbundle and tell you how it works. But that's my submission is, it's imperative that you're very cautious of what you're bringing in and you're very clear about how it works. You cannot absolve responsibility to say, oh, I don't know, I signed the dotted line, it was a black box. I don't think you have a role to play and you better own up to it.
And it's like holding a parent responsible for a child's action. While the child is young, sure, but when the child is an adult, should the parent be held responsible? Sanjay, a technologist's view.
Okay, so this is a great topic, because so much of current research is happening in this around what we call explainable AI. So maybe most of you might have heard the term deep learning. So artificial intelligence has many versions. So one of the best is deep learning, which has revolutionized AI. So deep learning is really good because I've used it in so many scenarios and we get just amazed with what it can do for you. But it has one fundamental limitation. You don't know how it is doing it. Because it's a complex, mathematical treatment which is possible because of huge computing power that we have. So humanly, it's not possible how did that algorithm figure it out, but it is fairly accurate in many scenarios. But in many scenarios, you are sometimes, through regulation, you are required to make your decisions explainable. For example, whether it's a GDPR regulation in Europe, there was earlier an example of insurance. I'm giving you a recommendation for an insurance, but as a consumer, I want to know why, right? So it's an unsolved problem, but a lot of interesting research happening there. So that's one dimension, and I'm sure something interesting will come up. The second important dimension is probably goes back to even your earlier panel on the whole discussion about purpose and culture. And many a times when we discuss those terminologies, we think internally with our employees in mind. But our culture or our purpose, the impact is felt in the external world, equally. Take example, again, a very interesting research topic of the driverless car. And you, as a consumer, go to a car of a particular make, which is a driverless car. And what it does is, in the case of an accident, it is programmed to save you and not 5 people who will otherwise get killed, right? So the equation is you can now, you can kill 5 people or you can save yourself. Now, car number 1, manufacturer has programmed it such that irrespective of how many people is there, you will be safe. Car number 2 actually has an algorithm that says protect the maximum number of people. Okay, and if that means that you as the owner and driver will get killed, so be it. Now, as a consumer, I don't know how many people would buy from the second, would prefer to buy from the second. Anybody in this room says, no, I'll still buy from the second manufacturer. And I'd say both the scenarios are good, right? Both the scenarios. It depends on individuals. So I'm sure there will be a significant percentage who would say, let me save myself. And there will be a significant percentage who would say that, hey, let's save the world or let's save more people. So all these technologies will bring out new possibilities, which we don't think about today. you know. And they are not very far away. Even things around many of the systems we use today, for example, in visa processing and things like that, those models may be very skewed towards people of a certain race or a certain region, because they have been trained with data of that race or that region, right? And so, you know, there are a lot of examples like, I think it was Australia or New Zealand, where a person of Chinese descent was actually said that, you know, you have kept your eyes closed, you should open your eyes, because the system felt the eyes was not open enough, you know, because it is trained on Eurasians, for example. Many of our medical systems that will use machine learning models are actually not trained on, for example, our own Indian data. So we are being measured because every race has a certain, nuance to the medical data as well. But your parameters are being compared to data that has been, a model that has been trained with maybe white Americans or something like that, right? And then you are out of the range and you have to do something about it. So I think all these technologies hold tremendous promise. That is a huge layer of, you know, it's not just, it works, emotion analytics works, I can tell you. In my lab, it works. It's so scary the way it works. You know, when the CEO talks, switch on our emotion analyzer and try to see how much we can. But will we deploy it? You know, because there are a lot of other questions around it. Questions around ethics, questions around, you know, I'm speaking right now. Would I like you guys to analyze me? So, you know,
why not?
So she would love to be analyzed.
Yeah.
So kindly.
Yeah.
but consent. Explicit consent. But, you know, these are the questions we don't ask today. But these are going to be realities in the very near future. They are already reality today to a great extent, right? So technology is there, but the adoption will take its own time, because there are a lot of non-technical questions to be ironed out for digital.
So Jaideep, I want to just
certainly.
go.
I just want to request you. I got a message from the chef out there. He's feeling neglected. He said like lovely food.
I know, but I want to react to some of the things that have got said. Sorry, I need to. I think it's very interesting that we brought in the example of responsible artificial intelligence and deep learning and machine learning. I think that's where the attitude of the people who are sitting in this room will matter in terms of deploying technology. Therefore, are you asking questions to your vendors and suppliers who are providing AI solutions to you, that are we getting responsible AI in place or not? So at IBM, for example, for Watson, which is our AI, we've worked with universities, the Ivy League universities, to identify 208 biases, okay, that exist in humans. Those biases are what the machines are learning, because we've operated with those biases, right? So ethnic diversity selection, you know, in terms of people in organizations, these are biases that have not existed earlier because machines were there. These biases existed because humans had those biases, right? We view different races differently, right? Diagnosis of doctors can be wrong. Drivers, human beings, some of them currently when they drive, take the decision to save themselves versus taking the decision of saving the passenger versus taking the decision of people on the road, right? That's what the machines are learning. So I think it's some way human responsibility to ensure that we learn. But I think as people who partake in corporate organizations who provide these solutions, are you asking these questions to your vendors? Because I think that's the important thing that we are learning at IBM, that your tech solutions that you provide need to be responsible and need to be worried about these things, which is why sometimes some solutions take a very long time to roll out. And in the space of health tech, for example, I think very consciously whoever is implementing health tech is saying that the health tech will be assisting a doctor's diagnosis and will not probably do a direct diagnosis on their own. It can't be, because you know that you can't afford even a singular mistake. However, let me also give example of where you can afford to make mistakes, right? Now, if you're a banking organization, I can't send Nandini's account details to Roma, right? It will be sacrilege. As a bank, I would lose my credibility, right? But when I was working for Mahindra Holidays, and we were sending holiday plans, I was going to ask Nandini to suggest and, ask her that please, why don't you holiday in Shimla this year during December because you holidayed in Dharamshala last year, right? Now, if I tell her not Mussoorie or not Dharamshala, instead I tell her Jaisalmer, it's not going to be such a big problem. Right? It's not a reputational risk, and it is not something which is breaching her data privacy issues. So I think that is also something that we need to look at. Your AI and technology solution is getting applied where? Is that solution taking life-threatening decisions or not? Having said that, so, to my mind, therefore, the examples that we've got, or the legal solutions that you provide, right? The solutioning in the compliance reports, right? There are areas where you can't afford to make a mistake, and there are areas where, 2%, 1%, 0.01% errors are allowed. And I just want for a moment all of you to think, do humans not make mistakes? Have we not had reputational risks to our organizations because humans managed it and AI did not manage it earlier? I think that's the question that also needs to be seen. I think as captains of industry, as CXOs in various organizations, it's our responsibility, one, to always ask, are we buying technology from a company which holds itself responsible for this? And secondly, when I'm deploying this solution, can I afford a margin of error and are lives getting impacted or not? I think once you ask these 2-3 questions, the things that we've been discussing probably won't hold true that much.
Thank you. And like I said, this is very juicy. We'll have to take the audience questions offline, but just to wrap, thank you panelists for your views. I think in summary, organizations need to definitely embrace digital technology, be aware of what AI is doing to them, embrace them fast and mitigate the risks. With that, I thank all of you and thank you for being a lovely audience. Thank you.
But don't miss the value of the human connection, right? Because I think that's going to be the most important thing. I think whilst all technology can enamor us, let's not miss that bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll take a short break for lunch and then assemble. All those who didn't get their coffee earlier can gather now.